Welcome to the Medisynergy podcast. I'm Imogen, a 17-year-old A-level student, here to bring you the best people with knowledge and insight on how to get into med school, how to become a doctor, and to help you decide whether a career in and around medicine is for you. I'm here today with a very special guest, Micheal Watts, who is an NHS doctor and founder of Blüm Health. Welcome to the Medisynergy podcast, Micheal. It's great to have you on here.
Thanks for having me, Imogen.
No worries. So just to start off, just say a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and explain what you do at the moment.
Sure. I'm Micheal. I'm a doctor by background. I've actually worked for the NHS since I was 18 years old. So as I was kind of going into med school and medicine in general, I was a healthcare assistant. I actually didn't get into medicine the first time round, so I did biomedical science. Decided that I still wanted to do medicine. So after I graduated, I went to graduate entry medicine in Liverpool, and from there really kind of grew my interest in medicine, caring for people. But then my whole career kind of took a bit of a pivot, a change in direction when I saw an opportunity to make a wider scale change through digital health, and my love for that kind of started early in my sort of medical school journey, but didn't really surface until I started practicing as a doctor, which I realize nowadays is fairly late on, given that everyone's interested in digital health. But so that was it for me. I've done 9 years at university. I've done a business degree as well, so I've spent most of my adult life in university, but it's been a heck of a journey, and I wouldn't change any of it.
Oh, that's good, because a lot of people, when they leave, they might have regrets if they went into it in the first place. So it's good that you don't have any regrets. And do you think your biomed and medicine degree helped you with what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different in very many ways. I mean, I got a bit of lab exposure, which I think is good, because obviously healthcare, when we think about healthcare or looking after patients, it's not just a hospital, right? There is community care, there is laboratory, there's dentistry, there's veterinary. It all ties into that sort of family support services, social care as well. So yeah, I mean, biomedical science gave me a new exposure to life sciences, but I think mainly doing graduate entry medicine actually gave me a level of maturity that when it came to medical school, I think it gave me a bit of an advantage. I was a little bit more familiar with academia, familiar with writing sort of papers and assignments. So I don't regret any of it. I think obviously during medical school I had a lot of people in and around sort of placement and things like that saying, get out while you can, and you'll hear it time and time again. That's their personal opinion. I think if you're on a journey, focus on what's important to you and why you're doing what you're doing, and don't let external influences around you sort of change that course of direction.
That's really helpful. And I do hear it a lot of people saying, like most doctors I've spoken to have said, don't do it. And it's quite worrying. It's like, are they joking? Are they not? And as you say, it's very personal, and you're not really sure what will work for you until you do it sometimes, which is a bit scary. But yeah, definitely a good point to make.
Just on that, Imogen, there's a really good book or guy, or loads of podcasts by a guy called Simon Sinek, and it's all about start with the why. So I think it's probably something that everyone should read as they're going to university, because it's all about understanding why you're doing what you're doing, right? So it's mainly around business, and obviously why a business has been formed. So it's really good, because if you know why a business has been formed, you know that you're going to be able to serve a service or deliver a product to an individual. But actually, if you take that concept and apply it to applying for university or medical school more specifically, understanding why you're going to do medicine is more important. If it's external influences, if it's parents, if it's that's what you always thought you could do, you didn't really think about what else. Think about, is it actually your why, or is it someone else's why? And I think if I'd have known that when I first applied, maybe I was applying for the wrong reasons, but actually through it all, it still worked out for me, and I still did enjoy it. So I think start with the why is probably something that I would recommend everyone do.
Yeah, that sounds really, really good. And it's something that I usually ask my podcast guests, why did you want to do medicine? Why are you still in medicine? One, to help me and my listeners kind of figure out if their reasons are right, but also just to hear from other people why they wanted to do it. And
Sure.
so you've kind of answered my next question a little bit on did you always want to go into health tech? But I think what was that pivot? What made you want to go into health tech rather than pursuing medicine?
So, I mean, I still do practice clinically, so I am still in medicine in theory. I also have a non-clinical role within my local NHS trust, so I am still very much focused on clinical care. And my why was always around change. You know, I think for me it was about delivering change one way or another. I wanted to change something, whether it be the life of an individual, the life of many individuals, the life of a hospital. So realistically, when I started practicing as a doctor, or I did start to notice in placements in medical school, I realized that you could change the life of a patient. That impact that you have as a clinician, as a healthcare professional, is remarkable, and you can't ever take that away from the NHS or healthcare services globally. But it was the impact and the size of change that I was delivering as an individual felt sort of restricted in my day-to-day. I might see, I was doing A&E and still do A&E and acute medicine. So I might see 6 to 8 patients if I'm lucky in a shift, which to many people that is, a good amount of impact. But for me, it was kind of, what can I do to impact on hundreds, thousands of patients a day? So I tied that kind of why in with my interest in digital and technology, to really think about, what could I do differently about this? We've got a system that needs digitalization to be able to cope with demand. We've got a load of tech at our hands, our fingertips, that's ready to be utilized within a healthcare setting. So I took the plunge to start a business. Well, it wasn't a business for a long time. It was an idea around, building NHS ready software, which was bringing clinicians and engineers together to actually build software that we thought was going to be able to deliver that service and impact on as many people as we possibly could in the shortest amount of time possible. So that's kind of where the thinking around med school and why I wanted to be a doctor came in, but then how I actually then sort of accelerated that and used it to start a different journey.
I really love that about delivering change. I think that's a really good reason to do anything really. And as you said, kind of you can have a very small impact or even a bigger impact than most people being a clinician, but you could have a kind of population impact going into digital health or health tech, that kind of thing potentially. So it is really interesting that you kind of wanted to increase the impact you can have on people.
Yeah. And I think if you think about change, so there's a really nice saying, which is change occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. So, and that works for everything, right? So the reason that people have divorces is because the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Obviously, going through a divorce is a highly, highly stressful thing, but actually the pain of staying the same in an unhappy relationship is more painful over a longer period of time. And therefore, change occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. So when you look at that in the context of the NHS, we are going through change, because if we stay the same, the NHS is not sustainable, right? We have a lot more patients. We have, a workforce that is at capacity. So something needs to change, because the pain of staying the same is too high. So we're doing little bits of change to try and facilitate that change across the NHS. It's a grand task, and it's certainly not something that the team at Blüm can do single-handedly, but together we can make change. So yeah, that's another nice way of thinking about anything in life. If you're unhappy about something and it's painful, think about whether the pain of change is greater or less, and if it's less, change.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make. And also, so with Blüm, is that a service that the NHS uses, or is that kind of separate to the NHS?
Yeah, so everything we do is patient-centric. So it is a business, so it has staff and it needs to pay staff. But ultimately, what we've achieved is the ability to build software for NHS trusts, for universities, and for organizations that sit in and around that ecosystem. So over the last few years, we were born out of the pandemic. Over the last few years, we built products for NHS trusts, as you say. We've built products for universities that have then gone on to prove concept in the universities. And we've built products for industry that have then been able to deliver care and allied services into the NHS. So we try and have an NHS-centric focus on everything we do. Obviously, as a clinician, that still then enables me to have an impact and have a focus. But it is obviously, it's not an NHS company, it's not an NHS project. It is sat separately from that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because I've heard a lot about it being very hard to sell services or products in the NHS for certain reasons. I'm sure you've experienced that. So what is the main kind of product that, just to be clear, or service that you offer?
Yeah, so it's software development. So we have a team of engineers and a team of clinical staff that look at what a problem is. So it might be a clinical entrepreneur. There's a few accelerators now that enable healthcare professionals, not just doctors, nurses, midwives, practitioners, to be able to take an idea and turn it into a reality. So we really support them on that journey if it's digital. So if it's software, they've got an idea that they want to build some software, we will support them on that journey, turning that from an idea to reality. So we provide that service. Now we're doing it in a few clever ways. We're looking at actually what is the regulation, because it's a bit of a regulatory minefield. Healthcare, obviously, patients are the end beneficiary, so therefore there is a risk because you could cause patient harm. So what we did was we took the clinical knowledge of what we assume to be clinical safety, apply that to software development to be able to get what we now call NHS ready software. So we're software developers with a NHS focus, is probably what I'd say in a sentence.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know, just to be clear on what you actually do. So
That's all right.
no, that's really, really good. And so I met you with my dad at the SOMEX healthtech talks at Google HQ. And as the founder of a healthtech company, do you attend lots of events like that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the good thing about healthcare is it's a very close-knit community. It's a very supportive community. It's very collaborative. So I started going to conferences when I was a medical student. In fact, I went to one called Doctorprenuers, which is a good friend of mine, or there's a few of them actually, who founded that, and that was all about sort of alternative options in medicine, and I encourage everyone to go and look at that. And just immersing myself in those sort of networks and conferences, I started to realize that I wasn't alone in thinking, I wanted to do things a little bit differently. There's loads of people out there that are doing this. And so going to these events is really important part of growing personally, but also growing your idea, growing your business, and just immersing yourself in that community of like-minded individuals that want to bring about change. And actually, I met the founding team at Blüm. I actually met at a conference, so it was there that I actually found some lifelong friends and business partners. So yeah, absolutely. Network, they say network is net worth. So the more network you have, the more you're valuable, because you can make things happen that otherwise you wouldn't ever be able to do on your own.
That is so true. Network is your net worth. I really like that. And having only been to one conference or health tech event, and going to the next one on Wednesday, it's quite exciting to start meeting all these people, and as you say, kind of immersing yourself in different opportunities and not just one thing. So yeah, it's really, really good. You've kind of mentioned it before about creating change and being able to impact lots of different people's lives. So with that, are there any other aims for Blüm Health that you have kind of vision?
Yeah, so one of the things we're trying to solve, or we're in the process of solving actually, is around the barriers to innovation. We've solved a couple of them. So regulation, obviously, as I say, we've tried to break that down by having clinical teams and technical teams that understand data protection, cybersecurity, clinical safety. The other one is cost. Obviously, to build software is expensive. Engineers are expensive. So we're looking at actually breaking down that barrier by pre-building almost building blocks of code, so that instead of coming to us and saying, can you build this idea that I've got, Michael, and we say, yeah, it's going to cost this much, we actually say, well, let's look at what we've got. Have we got building blocks that we can actually just string together, obviously code together, but string together to create an ecosystem or a system that actually delivers that service, and it doesn't require all of the sort of rigorous software development resource capabilities that so often stump a startup that doesn't have lots of investment or lots of money to be able to start that idea. So we're creating a concept called Blüm Connect, which is that ability to string together pre-built components so that you have a robust, scalable Blüm quality software solution, but it doesn't come with that traditional bespoke development price tag, and it's more efficiently built. So that's what we're trying to achieve as an organization. It's still in process. It's probably going to be launched in the next couple of months. So watch this space on that one. But we think that is going to change the industry as we know it, because it's going to open up a whole host of opportunities for people to build more efficiently, more affordably, but still with the quality that would be expected of the NHS.
Wow, that's such a great goal and vision to just kind of change the whole space, and instead of just creating all these new things, kind of seeing, what are the barriers there already. Let's get rid of those and then move on. I really like that idea of that way of doing things. It makes sense, but a lot of people, I can imagine, don't do that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about sort of creating that playground for people to try new things. I think obviously people don't like taking risks. As doctors, we very rarely take risks. We are trained not to take risks, and I think that carries over into the world of innovation. So what we're trying to do is create a safe space for people to take risks, it not be expensive to take the risk. Try something. If it doesn't work, you've not lost out too much time and money. So that's what we're trying to achieve, is that safe space for clinical innovation.
Well, that's really good, and you learn from taking risks, so it's good to have, as I say, a safe space to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And so going back to your kind of clinical side of things, you mentioned how you've done a bit of work in A&E, and well, as being a doctor anyway, you must have seen quite a few things. And a question I like to ask on my podcast for the kind of medical students, pre-med students, is have you seen any gory stories kind of thing? Obviously, being professional and everything, but is there anything that stands out to you that's quite shocking?
Yeah, I did a placement on trauma and orthopedics, and I thought for a long time, I thought that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a bone doctor. And then I remember I was in hospital one evening or night, and there was a hand. I mean, you see this quite a lot actually, so it's not that special, but it is quite gory. Circular saw injury on a hand. So basically pushed a circular saw and thumb went through the saw, and thumb was kind of hanging off like this. And it was actually really quite amazing, because hand surgery is a specialist area, and seeing how they preserved what was left of this thumb and the surgery that the patient had to undergo, really quite spectacular. But yeah, I think my stomach for that kind of stuff is probably worse than I thought it would be. So yeah, it was quite gory, but really cool actually. And it just kind of goes to show really what you can achieve and what you can do nowadays in medicine. And surgery particularly. It's quite remarkable.
That's high up on the gory story list. Oh yeah, that's so true. Everyone who I ask says this was really horrible, but it's really cool what the doctors could do to help them. So staying with the kind of NHS doctor theme, what do you think the main thing we can expect to see in the future around health tech in the NHS is?
Ultimately, what we need to do is make the patient journey more, or the care, the person, patient is the wrong word really. So the service user, increasing their efficiency through a service, right? So being able to prepare that patient digitally, or through sort of e-triage, understanding what's going on before we know what's going on, preventative medicine, all of that stuff that happens between the hospital, increasing the efficiency through the hospital. So patient flow, how do we optimize that? How do we digitalize that? How do we know where the patient is, regardless of having to ask them what their name is? How do we think of like the Harry Potter Marauders map, right? How do we know where everyone is moving through a hospital? And we shouldn't even need to have a clipboard to be able to know that. We should just be able to know what the hospital state looks like at any set time. And then obviously discharge, effective discharge, getting patients into their community setting again, or their primary residence, virtual wards, being able to monitor patients from home to try and keep them out of hospital. It's not a safe place to be really, is it, in terms of infection and hard floors? So actually, how do we actually optimize patient journeys through a hospital, which in turn will reduce the demand on patients. And I think when you, demand on staff, and improve the outcomes of patients. And so if you think about that, and you think about all the technologies we've got around AI and how that is supporting decision making, robot process automation, and how that is, reducing down the workload of current workforces, AR and virtual reality, how that is improving education and experiences. And so with all of that, I think what we're going to see is a more digitally enabled NHS, something that enables us to work more efficiently as healthcare professionals, but at the same time thinking about the patient or the service user and how their experience is improved through efficiency, staying out of hospital for as long as they can, being supported in their comfy place, which is most often home. So yeah, it's those kind of things that I think we're moving towards, and we're very much in that phase. It's a very exciting time for healthcare. In some ways, obviously, there's the actual pressures of the day-to-day, which is difficult, and we see that sort of year on year. But in terms of digital and advancing technologies in healthcare, it's a very current topic, as everyone knows.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've only had half a day on a geriatrics ward, and I can see that all of that would help massively. Most of the patients there had been there for a month at least, and they don't need to be there for a month. They only probably needed to be there for about 4 days, most of them. But it's that, where do they go next? What are they doing now, kind of thing. And then also you said about kind of digitalizing things. Where is everyone? And a lot of I was quite surprised the nurses had, I think it's Epic, the Epic app on some kind of phone system. And that was really interesting, because in theory it increases efficiency, but then at the same time the amount of questions that they had to answer that normally would be unnecessary and wouldn't be on a clipboard, I just found that really interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits with having, and like handheld devices and replacing paper with digital like that. It really does change the way that we support patients and colleagues as well.
Yeah, definitely. It was just really interesting to see, and so it's good to see other people's kind of point of view on that. And so to finish off, what would be your main kind of piece of advice to anyone in medicine as a med student, or wanting to study medicine, but they also want to get involved in the kind of health tech space as well? What would your advice be to them?
So I think there's kind of two things really. There's think big. So never think that there's only one option for you. There's always many options, and I think we very rarely actually explore options for how to do things. And that's not just a career in medicine, that's in life. I think there's so many different paths that you can take through medicine. One of the great privileges around medicine and a career in medicine is that you do have options, you do have choices, but obviously it cascades. Once you make a decision that you're going to be a surgical trainee, you embark on that journey, or you have to come back, start again, do something different. So just think about that, but also think about other experiences. We're now seeing portfolio doctors that will do some time in clinical, or some time in the NHS, and then some time doing something else. Ultimately, you've got to be happy, and it's better to have a happy NHS doctor that does 3 days in the NHS than versus an unhappy NHS doctor that does 5 days in the NHS. So and obviously employers will thank you for that, because they want to see that you're enjoying what you're doing, that you're happy and content with what you're doing. So I think balance is important. And then again, it's just finding problems. So in terms of what you were saying around advice for people interested in innovation or health technology, more specifically, it's about finding the problem. So never ever come up with a solution until you understand the problem. It's like a drill. No one actually ever wants to buy a drill. They want a hole in the wall, and they buy a drill. So the problem is the hole in the wall. How do I get it? The solution is the drill. So it's always important to think about, what am I actually solving? People come up with all crazy ideas and amazing applications, and then I ask them what the problem is, and they can't answer. So, and it's just not a viable opportunity. It's not a viable idea, because it has to solve a problem. It has to support patients. It has to improve staffing. to be able to be adopted as an innovation, as an idea. So start with the problem and work backwards is probably my main focus. And it's written in the books. There's nothing new around that, but I can't stress it enough, because so many times I've seen people embark on a journey where they start building a solution. It gets really sophisticated. They spent loads and loads of time on it, and then it gets shut down because they cannot explain why they've built what they've built.
That's such great advice. Definitely problem first, then what you need to do about it. So yeah, absolutely great advice. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
That's all today from the Medicine Synergy podcast.